Hello. Right now, there's nobody here, so I'm not talking to anybody, but hopefully you'll be here soon. I'm going to go fix something here so there's not the shininess. It's okay, Grace. If you haven't met Grace already, that's my dog, Gracie. So, welcome. And I'd love to know who's here in the chat to say hello in the chat, and then I'll know you're here, and that would be a good thing. Today, I'm going to be talking about guilt and the effects of underlying unconscious guilt. Now, this sounds like it's a pretty deep subject, which it is. And so I may talk a little bit slower. Um, it doesn't have to be deep and ugly and dark and scary, but it is complicated in a sense that we have so much investment in our consensus view of reality. We have so much investment in this concept of guilt. And to undo that, to relinquish the guilt, to give it up, to forgive ourselves for our mistakes, there's a lot of dilemmas. There's a lot of kind of complications there. There's a lot of yes, but what about, and you should, and but you can't, and things like that. So today, my intention is I've written quite a few notes today, so you're going to have to bear with me while I go back and forth. I'd like sometimes to speak so spontaneously, but sometimes I have to really focus on my notes, especially um, today because of the concepts and what we're talking about. Hi, Marge. Welcome. So today, the intention of this conversation, and I'm really wanting it to be a conversation, is to cultivate awareness of the qualities of the experience of guilt. Like, what is it actually? What's the experience you experience when you feel guilt? Like, how do you know that's guilt? And how do you know it's not exuberance? How do you know that? So that's my first question is how do you know what's the quality of the experience of guilt? What's that like? So the intention is to look at the what's the awareness of bringing about awareness of those qualities, but also in bringing about the awareness of the beliefs that says that guilt is required, it's necessary, and that it's really an important thing that we need in our lives. So the more that we can look at that, perhaps, then we can become more at choice about is that true? Marge says, for me, guilt has a cringing quality. Beautiful. So can you say more about that, Marge? Thank you. Because yes, that for me, that's the first sense of guilt is that cringing or kind of um, disappearing in my insignificance and in my lack of value. People make mistakes all the time, and one of the things that and Marge, as you're doing looking at that, and we're talking about that, we'll be continuing to explore what's this quality of experience. Yes, Marge says I disappear. Yes, there is that sense of disappearing that is a big part of this. And the reason that we're talking about this today, which is a little different than the intention, is this month of May, I'm talking about prosperity and spiritual development. And, and so part of being prosperous is the willingness to receive. And I talked about that a lot in the first, I think it was May 3rd, but I talked about the willingness to receive and the ability to receive the bounty, the abundance, the prosperity in all parts of our life. And if we feel guilty, if we feel like we're disappearing, like we're cringing, like we're withdrawing, retracting, we're not expanding into receivership. When we're in contraction, it's mostly because we feel a sense of unworthiness to whatever degree. And we do this to ourselves, we do this to others, and others do this to us. So part of this conversation today, I hope, will enlighten us in the ways that we carry a level of self worth, and that level of self worth draws to us certain experiences that contribute to more guilt or less guilt. Hi, Fred. Thanks for being here. I should look it down and say, I'm waving at your name down in the chat versus, hi, Fred. Nice to see you. Thanks for being here. So, part of this is getting clearer about, oh, so if I'm drawing to me experiences where other people are making me feel guilty, then I'm carrying a level of resonance with what they're saying. And so, if we talk about this out loud, I'm talking about it out loud, you're listening and hopefully taking it in and maybe expressing back, is I go, okay, for my own self, I have been living in this lifetime and quite a few of these decades, I have been inundated to whatever degree with shame and guilt from other people, blaming, shaming, you should be, you're not, you could be, all of those kinds of things. All of those statements says, hey, you're not okay the way you are. You should be different. And what we're pointing to is our humanness. We're pointing to the fact that we're human, and in our humanness, we're not enough. When people say you should be different, or make any kind of statements or eye movements or whatever that is a ridicule of you, they're saying to you, you're not okay as a human being. And we do this to the people we love the most, whether it's our children or our spouses, our dogs, our parents, our everybody. We do it to everybody. And we do it so unconsciously, and that's why it's so important to talk about this. Marge says, I'm feeling guilty right now about the times I put guilt trips on other people. Thank you. That's great, because that's what we do all the time. And we don't even know it. We're in denial of the degree to which we are guilting other people or guilting ourselves. And what it so I'm going to say it this way. The bottom line is, in all spiritual principles, all spiritual traditions and religions, basically at the level of the purest um, essence of that religion and spiritual tradition, is that we are, you've heard me say this before, we are aspects of the divine. We are God incarnate. God lives within us and through us. And so, if that is true, then our nature is that of complete worth, complete love, complete light. And that's what I believe. And that's what I'm working towards, in a sense of, I talk about wanting to know my full potentiality of this being in this human form. And the way that I know how to do that is to go, okay, let's look at this, let's look at that, and notice, where is there limiting beliefs, limiting perspectives, limiting orientations and beliefs, limiting judgments. Like, our judgments are based on, I know what's right and what other people should do, and they should do that. And that comes from a point of view that there is no God in us, that our humanness is flawed, but not our humanness is flawed with compassion, but your humanness is flawed and you're bad because of that. And we throw our anger at it, or we throw our guilt trips at it, or we do what we do, when it's like, wait, 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 wait. They're just a human being. They're a spirit being in a human experience, and they're in their learning process, and that's what they're in. Do I have a right to judge that? Do I have a right to judge that and make, in a sense, throw guilt on them? Do I have a right to do that? Because in essence, I don't know what their path is. I don't know what their learning is. I don't know what that is. It's over there. But I'm taking on the responsibility and the righteousness to say, hey, you are not okay as a human being. So part of this conversation for me is kind of it touches some very deep places in me because of my upbringing being so immersed in guilt and shame that it's taken me decades to be able to keep my head above water long enough to go, wait, wait, wait. I am not that what I thought I was. I'm not that worthless individual, insignificant, and grateful for the scraps of love that are kind of given to me. Piecemeal. I've gotten much further along, and as I get further along in living in my worth, as opposed to seeing my life and my happiness is to the detriment of my children or my ex-spouses or whatever, I live with the idea that my happiness was at the detriment of other people. Now, how prosperous can I be if I'm holding that perspective? How prosperous can I be if I'm holding that my happiness, any happiness or fulfillment is to the detriment of other people? That's that's a foundation of someone who is guilt-based and shame-based. And so if we can look at that and go, wow, that's pretty intense. I do that all the time and I don't even know it, then we can become more aware of how we can be more forgiving of our humanness. David Hawkins, I was reading this book today, one of the books of David Hawkins. This one's called Transcending Levels of Consciousness. And guilt and shame are at the very bottom of the levels of consciousness. The lowest level of consciousness is shame, and then that's 0 to 30, and then guilt shows up at 30. Now we're talking 30 out of 1,000. Jesus and Buddha and those guys are up at 800 to 1,000. So that those aspects of ourselves that are immersed in guilt, we want to be able to begin to let that go so that we have greater degrees of fulfillment, greater degrees of knowing ourselves in our fullest humanity and our fullest spiritual potential, all of it. So this is really about, can we shift and change the way that we see ourselves and the way that we see other people so that we can be more honoring of who's over there and who's over here. There's a song that came out quite a while ago, and it was, "What if God was one of us? Just a slob like one of us, just trying to make his way home." And that's, I think, what we're all trying to do is we're trying to make our way home the only way we know how. And some a friend of mine was is Israeli, and she visited Israel recently, and just came back just before this war broke out again. And it was devastating to her and crazy making, as it is to all of us. Why do we do that? And if we point fingers and say they're idiots, if we judge, our judgments in essence contributes to the war. This is very, very hard for us to imagine because our consensus reality says it's them over there, we're over here, we're the good guys, we're not making war. But when we are pointing the fingers and when we are projecting our guilt, we are not projecting love, we're not projecting compassion for whatever is going on over there. We're projecting anger, pissed off, guilt, shame. They shouldn't be that way. And as long as we're doing that, we're in a sense, I hate this thing called projection, but it is what it is. In a sense, when we project our guilt, we're not owning. How am I doing this to myself? Sorry. How am I not looking at where I hold guilt myself? Where am I looking at that where I'm not owning how I am holding guilt within myself? How am I not allowing my worth to be fulfilled and the potential of me to become who I am? So I hope this is making sense because it's kind of convoluted. It's easy, simple, uh, and then it's not. Okay, Grace. So, number one is, hang on a second. I'll be right back. Hey, hey, what up? So, if you guys have anything to say about that, that would be really great because it will keep this conversation going. Um, I know there's only two of you here right now, but hopefully you'll have something more to say. Um, so, number one, people make mistakes. Is it because we're idiots? That's the judgment, right? Maybe it's a mistake because we don't have enough information. Maybe it's where we made a mistake because we didn't know any better. Maybe it's a mistake because we're limited in our capacities to do something that someone else might say, "Hey, you should know how to do that." So Marge says, "So you're talking about the vibrational energy of guilt?" Yes. The vibration, and it's the vibration of guilt, the vibration of shame, the vibration of judging, the vibration of righteousness. We have a sense of, we know all of that, right? I know what it's like to feel righteous. I like the feeling of righteous. I like the vibration of righteous. I like being right about things. It makes me feel good. At the same time, it is not contributing to a higher vibration that comes not from righteousness, but from um, the rightness of everyone, the rightness of who is in front of me, where they are in this moment, without judgments, without assumptions, without expectations, but the the knowing of that. So in a sense, the vibration of compassion and forgiveness is so different than righteous. And we're so familiar with righteous. We're so familiar with guilting trip other people, because an empowerment that happens when we are guilting other people, because we have a sense of indignance if they don't. If we know something and they don't, we feel an indignance and this righteousness, and um, and it feels good because it feels empowering. And it feels empowering because there's so many ways that we have been disempowered by being guilted and shamed by other people, that we go, hey, this works. I'm going to do this because this is a way that I feel empowered. And so we do it. And but it doesn't contribute to my well-being, because in that righteousness, um, we're not able to actually have a relationship. We're not actually having. Here's a client of mine is his brother is dying, and my client is saying, we'll call him Mike. Mike is saying, "Hey, if only he would do A, B, and C, he wouldn't have to die." And so my client has a righteous, um, he's solution based. He knows what's right. He knows how to do it, and he says, if I could get my brother to just know this and think this way, he wouldn't have to die. And what's his brother's response to that? His brother hangs up the phone. Thank you very much. Goodbye. There's no room for relationship. There's no room for understanding. There's no room for intimacy. What we so crave in our existence, that level of being seen and witnessed. His brother is dying, and his brother, my client Mike, says, "Hey, if you only would do it this way." And there's no room for connection there. And so my conversations with my client Mike is like, what's with your agenda? What do you get out of holding on to that agenda that you got the answers? You're the solution superhero, and everybody should listen to you. It's a place of righteousness, and it's scary because as a male, that's what he was trained to do, is to be right, and his job as a consultant, be right. And yet it doesn't contribute to the well-being of himself or his partners, his brother. It doesn't. And so he's listening to this because he sees that, and through our conversation, he's seeing that, wow, when I pull my agenda out and exploit this moment, is the way that he put it, exploit this moment, his brother hung up the phone and he missed the opportunity. Mike missed the opportunity because of his righteousness. He has to stay alive. He has to do it. He's got to do it my way. Because of that, there's no room for connection. There's no room for true understanding, true connection, and to coming together. So I changed my clients' names and situations so that there's complete anonymity and confidentiality. So I'll just say that. But the situation of our righteousness, I know that place because I've been righteous most of my life. And it's it's very difficult. And what's the point of my righteousness is it protects me and armors me, keeps me invulnerable from being guilted and shamed and diminished in my humanness. And we all do it. If I were to tell you I didn't, then I would be lying, and I would be trying to be righteous about myself as if I were on a pedestal. Marge says guilting others is a way of bullying that sadly is all too acceptable. That's correct. That's great. Yeah. Quite often in the Course in Miracles, they talk about special relationships. And special relationships are those relationships we want with other people that we can, we call ours, this is my husband, this is my wife, this is my child. And, and we have this relationship. But quite often, that relationship is built on that they're not enough or I'm not enough. And that not enoughness keeps people together even though they're not happy. So, and we call it love. We call it love. We're staying together because we love each other, but maybe it's something else. But quite often we're guilting the people that we love the most because their humanness is interfering with our way it should be. And that's a kind of an interesting situation. Their humanness, who they are in their being, is interfering with my happiness. So they better change. I want to welcome the people that have shown up. Thank you. And if you would say hello in the comments, that would be great. If what I'm saying is of value, I'd love you to give me a thumbs up because that would let me know that what I'm saying is of value. That would be a good thing. So if we really love the people we love, how do we learn to be in unconditional love of them? How do we watch ourselves be something other than unconditionally loving, honoring, revering, respecting, trusting? That's what we want in a relationship. That's what we want from our partners, right? That's what I want from my partner. That's what I want from my children. That's what I want from my friends. And if it's not forthcoming in that, then I'm going to go away. I mean, I've gotten to the point where I'm going to go away as opposed to sticking around and going, well, maybe I deserve it, or maybe I need to change, or maybe there's something wrong with me. And 99% of the time, I can find something wrong with me. And I grew and grew and grew because whatever the person was saying, I'd say, okay, I'll change. Rather than saying, hey, you're beating me up, man. Stop that. Or I'm going away. I just kept taking it and going, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're right. And I got to a point where I was pretty suicidal because I felt like a worthless piece of poo. Because that inside myself was probably what I was not probably, just trying to soften it a little bit, but because that's really what I thought I was worth was a tiny piece of poo. And so I kept drawing like a magnet to these people that were treating me that way because that's what I thought I was worth. My self-worth was that. And to have something else, it was just even out of my capability of imagining that. But in ways it was kept being so uncomfortable. I'm doing this because I'm like pulling myself out of that excrement stuff and coming above it enough to go, wow, I really want a better life for myself. How do I do this? So by reading David Hawkins' work, he talks about more and more, and especially in another book I was reading called Healing and Recovery, he talks about how underlying unconscious guilt is, in essence, the main contributing factor to most illnesses and diseases, especially cancer. Now, this is researched, okay? This is not just woo woo vibrational stuff. Our underlying guilt is a highly contributable piece of the puzzle of our illnesses and our diseases. And if we can, because, and he says it vibrationally, it can't match. If you have this, and we're understanding this more and more in the sciences, the understanding the unconscious in terms of what's a thought, what's an energy, what's a belief system, and how does it contribute to wealth, health, and well-being and wealth. They know this now. They see it. And so many spiritual teachers and so many other teachers are saying, hey, your belief system about yourself and the world is what contributes to you having more happiness, more fulfillment, more money, more love. That's the way it is. So if like David Hawkins is saying, okay, what's the underlying unconscious guilt that's hanging out there? Why not look at it? Why not go, yeah, I want to see what that is, because I don't want to be living in this stuff. I want to live in happiness and fulfillment and delight. I want more experiences of wonder and playfulness and laughter with my friends. That's what I want. And if I have to look at this thing called guilt inside me, why not? What's the harm in doing that? So so after listening, David, um, or yeah, listening to this, I the next day I was like, well, no, I don't think I have very much unconscious guilt left. And I was made some breakfast, and then I go, well, I should vacuum more often. And I got that feeling, Marge, that you talked about, that kind of cringing feeling. And it was like, wow, that's guilt. And it's like, yeah, I should clean the house more often. I should vacuum more often. Was I'm not a good human being because I don't keep my house. I haven't vacuumed for a month, right? So it's like I should vacuum more because I should be a better human being. And then I went to the store. It's like, well, you should get some gluten bread, or you should gluten-free bread, or you should. And there was this should thing again. And the should points to my diminished sense of self. You're not enough. You should do it different. We have these in our language so often that we just anticipate that cringe every time you go, yeah, I should. It's like it's like pulling a piece of hair out every single time you say you should, because you go cringe, cringe, cringe. I should do this. I should be this way. I should do that. I should. They should. He should. Israel should. Palestine should. It's on and on and on. And it's like, wow, that's a source that is sourced in our that unconscious guilt that I'm not enough as a human being. My humanness is not enough. My beingness is not enough. And where did I learn that? I learned it probably before I came into this planet. I mean, this lifetime. I probably learned it in other lifetimes, where I got burned at the stake or stoned or was imprisoned or raped or whatever that goes on in this lifetime for some people and other lifetimes for other people. And that's just an energy or vibration that we all bring in, and then we deal with that, and we can learn from it. We don't have to go, oh well, I learned that from a past life, I have to just live with it. It's like, no, you get to look at it and go, I don't need to be that way anymore. That was a past life. That was a past life. That's over. And it's no different than different parts of our life that are over. I was married twice, and I had stuff that happened, and things that didn't go well, and things that I wasn't a good person about or whatever. And it's like, how how can I let go of that? It's a past life, literally. And so my job is my job as a human being in and a spiritual being in this human potentiality is to say, how do I let go of that guilt? And the first way is to notice guilt. Notice that cringing, notice that quality of experience when you're in something other than joy. So, any thoughts about that? Any Marge, Marge. So a past life is yesterday, and we can be done with yesterday. We can be done with all that stuff. We can be done with the stories of who we were or what happened to us. Um, the stories of our being victimized are stories of shame and guilt and trauma. But we carry the shame. I shouldn't have been traumatized like that. I shouldn't have been there. I shouldn't have made that decision. I shouldn't have walked across the street the way I did. It's my fault, and therefore I carry the guilt of that. Like, for what? For what? That's the question. And it's a big question because we have to be clear about this. What does that do for us to remain in our guilt? And it's like, if I give up my guilt, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? What's gonna show up if I give up my guilt? We kind of talked about this last week and the week before about unforgiveness. What does that do for me to remain unforgiving? What does it do for me to remain in guilt? Marge says, "Do you need to know where the guilt came from or just recognize it when it comes?" Yeah, you don't have to know where it came from. You can just know and like you say, you can just recognize that it's there. And um, two things you can do with it, in a sense that. So first of all, I'm saying. So your question, I'm going to answer your question like this: Do you need to know where the guilt came from? No. Is guilt just one of those habit things? Oh, I just feel guilty. It just happens, and so you can go stop. The guilt comes up. You have that guilty thought. Oh, I should eat better. Stop. I'm not going to eat better. I'm not going to eat better. I had a challenging morning, and so and so it was like I want to eat. I want to eat something, and I want to eat what I want to eat. And so I had a tuna fish sandwich on a nice, beautiful, soft, glutinous hot dog bun, and it was perfect. Now I don't do well on gluten, but I know that when I want something, I'm not going to feel guilty about it anymore. I'm just going to say I'm doing it. I'm going for it. March says we need to be kinder to ourselves and accept that we're human. Exactly. Exactly. But that's a bigger concept. And when we're in the moment of having a moment, a trigger, something triggered us to feel guilty in a sense. It's like, I want bread. All I've got are hot dog buns. It's like, oh, I could feel guilty about that. Cringe, diminish self. You are so bad because you're going to eat a hot dog bun. It's like, no, I'm going to eat a hot dog bun and I'm going to enjoy it thoroughly. So there's those points where it's like, oh, I could choose guilt. Because the habit is to automatically go to guilt. Now I'm at the point where I see it, feel it. We identify the experience, the quality of the experience of it to the degree that we have, and go, ooh, no, I'm not going to feel that. I'm going to have what I want because it's going to nourish my sense of self right now. So I'm not gonna do the guilt thing. And that's the point where we begin to empower ourselves to do it different. So number one is, oh, here's this moment of potential guilt. And it's like, oh, I'm gonna just say no, not doing it. Or I'm feeling it and go, that's really interesting. I wonder what that's about. So if I can just diminish it or put it away or say stop, that's a good thing. But sometimes this is tied into something deeper, and so that's when we can be more introspective to say, I need to sit with myself about this because I'm experiencing this not only just at the head level, but my being is being affected by this. And so I'm going to sit with myself, honor myself, and like you're saying, Marge, be more accepting and kinder and say, okay, some part of myself a long time ago, which might have been 5 days ago or 3 minutes ago, some part of myself got wounded. And I'm going to sit with that part and I'm going to honor her. I'm going to let her know that that it's okay, whatever happened. I love her, and there's nothing wrong here. And it might take me back to some memory from somewhere that just lets me remember what that was in that moment. It might trigger the memory, but it's not necessary. What's necessary is that we have the experience. We go, oh, there's the guilt. Is there a point to the guilt? Is the guilt there to teach me something or tell me something? If not, then you can let it go. If you go, ooh, and some people say, well, the guilt helps me stay on my diet. Some people say that. And so it's like, is that it might help, but is it worth it in the end to be managing your diet through guilt? Is that what you want to do? That's just a question. It's not a righteous question. It's just like, well, let's look at that. You want to manage your diet through guilt? Do you want other people to manage your behavior through guilt? Because that's what we do in our relationships. At work, ooh, boss is coming. I got to look busy. I had a moment of guilt, right? Rather than doing what I'm here to do and get paid for, it's like, ooh, the boss is coming. I better look busy. And it's like, oh, and he's okay. He's gone now. Phew. And I can go back to Facebook or whatever. But if I'm am I guilty of something? Yeah, I'm not doing my work. Okay, great. I better do my work because that's what I'm getting paid for. Not better do my work because I'll get fired, but I'm going to do my work because I'm in integrity and because I'm here to do that. But if we're in that fear guilt relationship, blah, I just feel that yuck, fear guilt relationship. If I do this, I got to be afraid. So that's why when I started out about almost 20, 40 minutes ago, it's like, this is hard because there's so many complications to this. It's like now I'm talking about fear. If I'm guilty, guess what happens when you're guilty? Or even when you're not guilty, right? And whether you're guilty or not, that's just going to happen. It's a sad state of affairs, and it is what it is, and that's not what this is about in this moment. Except to say, if I'm guilty, then something bad's going to happen, and so we have to be hyper vigilant. So another role that the guilt plays is it has trained us to be vigilant to potential harm. And that's a control thing. It's all about control. Just like fear. Fear is about control. And if you look at your relationships with the people you love, what's the degree to which you are operating from control versus love? Blech. Who wants to look at that? Says the woman who's been living alone for 8 years, 9 years now. Um, but I have to look at that all the time because I'm in a relationship with my clients, but I'm in a relationship with my children and my sisters, my family, and my friends, and so I have to watch myself because I I want to operate from authentic me and my humanness, regardless if somebody's gonna judge me or not. I want to be in my authentic humanness. I want to honor this being. I want to honor this life. This is the only one I'm going to get in this form. Do I want to keep beating myself up about that? Or do I want to actually honor and say, wow, aren't we doing great? Aren't we doing great to get here now? It can be very, very fun and very gratifying. Marge says, that's why I want to disappear, fear that I'll be found out. Yes. Yeah. And quite often, when people say, do I have to know the source of this? Here's the source of it. At some point, you got annihilated for being you. You got shot, violated, raped, um, mutilated, hung. You got something very bad happened to you because you were you. And it's anybody on this planet who's been here in past lives or whatever have most likely had at some point a traumatic ending. We got annihilated, and so we want to disappear because we don't want to get annihilated anymore. But when we realize the truth of our being as the aspect of God that we are, and the worth of a universal source of light that is God, then we are beyond the potential of that kind of annihilation, and we don't have to be afraid of it anymore. And that's why, I'm not going to go into that one. Um, uh, yeah, I'd rather be me and shine, and that's the point that it comes down to for so many people is I'd rather shine. I had this thought a long time ago. It was like um, something much like what you're saying is like I'm going to die either way. I'm going to die, and do I want to die um, feeling as if I'm living at the detriment of others, and I'm feeling in my living in my guilt and shame and hiding out and being playing small so that I don't get found out? Or am I willing to live my life fully in my full potentiality and die? That's pretty much it. Can I am I willing to shine and die, or am I too scared and I'm gonna play small? Like, what's the point of that? What's the point of that? And because your life isn't it's what David Hawkins calls slow suicide. Because you'll get sick or you'll get, you'll be unhappy, you'll be depressed, you'll be on medications, you'll be getting old very fast because you're spending so much energy doing this, being mad at the world at the same time. Look what you're doing over there. When we live in our fullness and our full potentiality, when we know our worth and we shine, we then are able to shine on other people, and that they are able to receive that shiny, and then they begin to shine. And then they begin to shine, and their shininess, it all becomes very contagious. But if we hide out and play small and judge and be righteous about them, but also I'm righteous about how bad a person I've been, better punish myself. That's another word that comes up with guilt is punishment. I better punish myself before somebody else punishes me. Okay. I'm done with that. Like you, Marge, it's like I'm going to live in my shininess as best I can. I'm learning. I'm learning how to do this. I don't talk from, oh yeah, I've been shiny my whole life. It's like, no, I have been a pathetic loser. That was my sense of self for so long. I'm a pathetic loser. And my life kind of reflected that in many ways, not in all ways, but in many ways. And so I'm given up that belief that I'm a pathetic loser. I've given up the need to punish myself before others punish me. I've given up beating myself up, given up all that stuff as best as I can. Now, I'm just this, and there's always levels of consciousness that I'm mining, or I'm mining, not undermining, but I'm mining and finding out and discovering more things about myself. I think I may have mentioned, maybe not, that I came across this part of me that has always been persecuted and victimized. And so my relationships with some people have kind of reflected that. Wow, in consistency. And that consistency went, wow, look at that. That's a pattern of mine. Persecuted victim, victim martyr. Okay, done with that. And it's not, we can call it a spiritual bypass to go, oh, done with that, just move on. But like I said, we can look at it and go, is that serving me in any way? And if not, then it's just an automatic pilot pattern that's coming on, and I can, like flies, just keep batting it away. If it's something that it's trying to teach me something or tell me about me, then I need to go sit with it and say, let's Let's have a conversation. I want to know. I want to hear what you have to say. And that doesn't it may take a therapist, or it may take a coach or a spiritual guide, but maybe it just takes a little bit of willingness to sit with yourself in closed eyes and say, I'm here for you because you're a human being and I'm here for you. And that's what we're here to do. And I talk about, spirituality, in a sense, as and more this is becoming clear for me that we are an aspect of the divine, and people who know that, and as I've said before, people who don't know that, it doesn't make sense. But as we have these conversations with ourselves and we begin to find out how we think and feel and how we know ourselves, and as we know ourselves we keep growing and expanding this sense of knowing, then this it becomes at some point obvious that we are an aspect of divine. And it doesn't have to be today or tomorrow or last week. It's like it's an evolution of self that we come into relationship to go, I'm an aspect of the divine. And you, my friend, are an aspect of the divine. And I see that in you and I know that in you and I honor you. And I want that for everyone. I want that for all of us. And much of that has to do with letting go of those patterns that are so automatic we don't even know we're doing it. The judging, the pointing the fingers, the 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 all the ways we do that. The news, the listening to the news. So, for instance, um, let me see if I can find this so that I can kind of sort of maybe stay on track. Um, some practices to consider is look at where what you're doing triggers guilt. So, for instance, I don't watch the news anymore or read the newspaper because I'm constantly it triggers guilt. If I'm reading a newspaper and there's the stock market stuff, I go, I'm not investing in the stock market. I should be investing in the stock market. That's what smart people do. Now I feel guilty about that. Or Martha Stewart is doing this. I go, oh, Martha Stewart's doing this. I'm not doing it. I must not be a good person. So that's a trigger for a lot of guilt in all of those different ways. Um, and or here's what's happening. But the news does that as well, where I'm watching and I'm seeing these terrible things happen, and now I feel powerless and helpless, and I feel guilty because I have a good life and they don't, or I feel judgy because they should be doing it like I'm doing it, and if I did enough, if I did more, if I was more of a political person, all that if I were more is guilt, 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 guilt. And so every all that does is makes me feel bad. And it doesn't contribute to the well-being of the people who are having a hard time that in essence, what's that word, are being exploited by news and commercials and money. The people who have had a bad situation, they got shot or they got stolen, they're being exploited by TV. And then we're watching that. And so in essence, we're exploiting those. For what reason? What does that give us? What does that do for us? Does that open our hearts? If it does, that's cool. You can sit in front of and watch the news and just pour your love out to those people. Wouldn't that's a beautiful practice. Say, these people need my love. I'm going to sit here and pour out love to them. That's a great practice. But otherwise, we're exploiting because we're watching the TV and we're watching the commercials and watching that stuff, and we're exploiting others in their victiming situations, horrible, terrible, and we're watching it and we're judging them. So weird, and that's why again I said this is very, very difficult conversation because there's no beginning and no end other than it's like at some point we have to stop. We have to stop. And we can stop by being more conscious, only by cultivating awareness of when and where we are cringing in that guilt. Because guilt is a family member of fear, and that does not contribute to anyone's well-being by any means. So during the day, so you notice the different ways that you can. So Marge says other people's pain as entertainment. Yeah, yeah, yep, 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 yep. So that's the truth. So when we become aware of that, that's a good thing because then we can maybe make some choices that go, is that how I want to be in my life? Is that how I want to spend my precious hours on this planet? Is that what I want for myself, for this being? It might be what my family does, but it's not what I want. And so I do this. That's what I do. So notice notice all the times in terms of if you want to become more aware of where your guilt is and make a difference and make a different choice about that, then you start looking at number one, anytime that you're feeling that cringe. The other day, I think I told this story. I woke up and I went, I want coffee. And I felt the immediate cringe of guilt for wanting coffee. And it was like, okay, I got to stop that. If I'm going to have coffee, I'm going to love every drop. Um, I'm not going to keep living in fear that something bad's going to happen to me if I have coffee and milk because the milk gives me phlegm or whatever. So notice that. Notice any time. So notice that the experiences that you're having that where you're cringing. Oh, I shouldn't be driving so fast. I shouldn't have gone through that yellow light. I shouldn't have all that stuff. Just watch that and go, okay, so we can stop that because now we're becoming conscious of it. Notice where, let's see, what else did I have here? Why am sorry. So I'm having a guilty moment because I'm not um, as connected right now and trying to do two things. I'm trying to talk to you and look at my notes. The truth is that you're a human being and humans, we don't know what we're doing. You have never been in this moment before. I've never been in this moment before. I am not a professional human being. I don't know how to do me. I'm practicing every single day. I'm practicing every single minute. I don't know how to do me, and nobody does. And we can write the books about it, but truly, all I want is for you to be comfortable with you don't know who you are, especially if you're living in guilt, because now you can't be you because you're going to feel guilty that you don't know you're you, and that something might happen. So I want you to know that you are. You are your highest truth. You are the divine. You are the aspect of the divine. You are worthy, 100% worthy, and 100% potentiality for having the most brilliant, prosperous, wonderful life because that's what's yours. They talk about in many religions is you own the kingdom. It's already yours. You just have to come out from prison, take off all this stuff, and just enjoy this beauty that's around you and the abundance of what's there for you in terms of love and friendship, companionship, compassion, your own human experience of being you. That's what we came here to have, not to live in guilt and fear and cringing all the time. So, as human beings, we make mistakes, and nobody on this planet has a right to make you feel bad about mistakes that you make. So that's number two. It's like people say things they do not have a right to say, period. I don't have a right to say things that I say. We don't have a right to hurt other people or to violate or to tell people how they should live their life. We don't have a right because we don't know. I only know that this is my experience. I'm here to learn. And whatever's happening in other parts of the world, those people are here to learn too. They're working it out the way they are. I am not an expert on any of that. I just know they are trying to work it out. I'm trying to work it out. You're trying to work it out. Marge says, I notice sometimes I'm making up excuses for a criticism that hasn't happened yet, but I know what I did and they might find out. Yeah. So those are moments where you can say, what's the point of that conversation? Can I forgive myself for, for what they might, I mean, we make mistakes. We make mistakes. And if they find out, I mean, in essence, there's a part of us that is cringing because we're waiting for the traumatic thing that happened, the worst of the worst of the worst. We're waiting for that to happen again. And we go, wow. So you don't want to be found out because you don't want them to come with the torches and the fire or whatever it is that you happened to you many years, many lifetimes ago, perhaps. And so you're rather than going, okay, I'm giving that one up. How much time do you spend making up excuses for criticisms that hasn't happened yet? How much of your time are you spending doing that? And we don't even know the outcome, right? They didn't find anything out because they didn't find anything out. And if they did, you can say, "Gosh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that," or but whatever. It's not. It doesn't have to be this living in this all the time. So we get to be more at choice. So number one, we make mistakes because we're human. Number two, we don't have to live in guilt. We can let go of it, and we can live in forgiveness as opposed to living in unforgiveness. And when we hold on to the guilt, we're living in unforgiveness. And what do you gain from that? Big question. And again, you are worthy. Today is as always, you are worthy of letting go of the guilt that you've been living with. You can let it go today, or begin to let go of it today. And you can begin to work with that, maybe with a therapist or somebody that you trust, or with a minister or spiritual guide or coach. You can work with that and get support and be done with it. It's a good thing. And David Hawkins' books are very, very good on that. Um, and so I think that's pretty much all I have to say. Yeah, Mark says, what a waste. Exactly. Let's go have some fun. Let's go play some golf. So, anything else? Let me see if there is. So, the point of all this is that when we're living in guilt and we're living in the vibration of guilt, we're living in the vibration of oppression, there's not much of this. There's a lot of this. And so we keep ourselves from receiving and knowing ourselves to be this joyous being that has the right to enjoy and love and be loved always. So thanks you guys for being here. If you like this, please subscribe if you haven't already. And thank you for liking it. And I will look forward to seeing you next week. We're going to have the last week in regards to prosperity. And we'll see you then. Okay. Bye for now.